Welcome everybody. My name's Tim. I work for Norfolk Rivers Trust, leading education and engagement. And Norfolk Rivers Trust is a charity that has Norfolk within its scope. We're not landowners. We're not statutory. We work with landowners. And the earlier talk about the Deer strategy mentioned trust, and that is a big thing for us. Is that we want to build up trust with our other partners so that we can enable a change in our wetland and river environments. Okay, so one of the key facts with our rivers across the country and also in Norfolk is access. So very, very small amount of our rivers have public access. And so therefore a lot of our work where we're enhancing, improving, protecting our wetlands and rivers isn't actually seen by the public. So our only way of communicating our work really is through social media channels, through short TV documentaries, newspaper reports, etc. But there's definitely an important part that the public play in understanding what's happening in nature and with nature recovery. But if they don't know, they can't play that part. I hope you like the image on the right, a sort of little pun on the title. So that's one of our lovely volunteers replanting a black poplar. He did get out of that cage eventually. Okay, so it's all about empowerment. In an ideal world, we would love every person in Norfolk to become an advocate for our wetlands, for our rivers, for those river corridors and beyond. And that's got to start with them understanding what's going on. So that it's got to start with some access, with a caveat that actually full access is not going to be possible and may not be appropriate. So what does that look like with Norfolk Rivers Trust? So we have a wide engagement program. So we work with schools. And the irony is we're project-based, we work across Norfolk, but actually it's quite hard for us to take school children to sites. So if we're working with children that go to school on the North Norfolk coast, we may well have to work out how to help their funding for transport so they can go to the Nar, which has got a fantastic Nar Valley River Walk, which has got public access. But actually there's a great high quality element to that. This school in particular is very coastal, and there's the town of Wells next to sea, and I was working with a youth group and I asked them, I said, so what's the name of your local river? And they didn't know. And I said, okay, so how come you don't know the name of your local river? They said, well, we go to the beach. They're a beach community, so they don't necessarily know about those rivers, but of course, particularly our North Norfolk rivers and even the River Nar will end up going into the sea. So there is that link between the interior of Norfolk and those riparian corridors and the coastal element. For example, Mawson and Blakeney Harbour, fantastic salt marsh coast, lots of conservation designations, has two rivers flowing into it. So what happens in those rivers will actually influence what's going on in that harbour in terms of shellfish and other elements of nature. The other aspect is we work closely with corporates, and so they will come out. This is a group from Aviva. This is at the Wendling Beck. So this is, a corporate volunteer day. They get to see an area that doesn't have public access. They get to learn about the project, and therefore they go back to their offices, back to their homes, and they talk about what they've seen. So they talk about the Wendling Beck and the wonderful project where nature is recovering and they're still growing blackcurrants. But they're providing a service, helping Dereham and other areas become more climate resilient because they're storing water, etc., etc. So they're really good, positive days. They're not ad hoc. I mean, we're project-based, so we don't, like Norfolk Wildlife Trust or the National Trust, we don't own land, so we don't offer a weekly volunteer day. So these will happen intermittently across the year, depending on what projects have opportunities for volunteers to help. Quite a lot of our work is involving heavy machinery when we're digging new channels, so not appropriate for volunteers to help with. However, towards the end of a project, we may well help sow seeds for buffer strips or plant hedges as well. So that's where the volunteers can come in and see what's going on the private land. So yeah, again, there's a project, this was over near Gissing on the left, where we were helping finish with volunteers a natural flood management project. So that was a really good opportunity. Again, land that doesn't have public access, but we were able to, with the right permissions, with the right risk management, invite volunteers to that area and talk to them about what's going on, the methodology, and for them to experience that. And I have to say it's a really hopeful way of going about things, because what we're doing is we're putting in infrastructure that's going to help mitigate climate change, help store our water, and so to tell that story is really important. So generally people leave the day really happy with a little bit of knowledge about what's going on in Norfolk in terms of how we can help Norfolk become a better place for nature and people. On the right is one of our work experience students from this year. So again, private woodland, helping us with monitoring water quality at a site where we'd put in some leaky dams. So again, that student, he's already interested in science and environment. So if you like, he's already signed up, but he will go back to his cohort, he will talk to his family, he will spread the word. So I've talked about the volunteering opportunities and the river walks, which are intermittent. Something that we are doing, and we've been doing for quite a few years now, is more regular. So on the left, we've got Casco, which is a water quality citizen science project in the Wensum. So that's a weekly monitoring programme. So that's regular monitoring. It started off about 3 years ago with 27 sites, 27 monitoring sites. It's grown and expanded. I can't remember what the number is now, but it's vastly more than 27. It has a robust scientific methodology. So I started off talking about empowering people. So people that get involved with Casco feel like they're doing something that's relevant, that's valid, that's vital, and helping build a database that will inform land management practices. Their work, their data has been validated by the UEA, by the Environment Agency, so it was moderated, and their data these citizen scientists are collecting is robust. So it is definitely informing our understanding of water and the pressures that water comes under through industry, through sewage management, etc. The irony there is, we choose sites that has public access, so they tend to be footbridges that go over watercourses or road bridges. They're risk assessed. There's no need to seek landowner permission for those sort of volunteers to access that land. They're pretty autonomous. They have a Survey 123 app. They go off usually at the weekend. They take their samples. They measure the phosphates, the ammonia, the dissolved oxygen, etc., and they upload it onto Survey 123. And they check in with Elle, who's in that picture, who's the coordinator, at regular intervals. They can do that in such an autonomous way because they don't need landowner permission to access. On the right, we're part of the Riverfly partnership, which is a national scheme. It looks at aquatic invertebrates, and scientists at the Freshwater Biological Association and the Natural History Museum have identified 8 groups that are, if you like, the canaries of the river. So if they're present, it shows that water quality is reasonable. If they're absent, it's not a good story. It's generally a monthly survey, April to October, because we have to be careful of the fish spawning season. Generally, all of those sites are on private land. So there's a whole structure of communicating with land managers, checking that it's okay, because obviously over the seasons, land management changes. We need to make sure our volunteers are not walking across land that might be being cultivated or whatever. So it takes a little bit more effort, and it's harder for those volunteers to become autonomous, but it does inform them, and it's great. Just to give you a bit of background. Thank you. So yeah, just to revise, so less than 4% of our rivers have public access, and there's been studies with Derbyshire University, the University of Derby, that that engagement with nature, with green spaces, is really, really important for people's well-being and mental health, and that has that's become more and more clear since the period where we had the pandemic. So the way we access or help the public access rivers is through promoting river walks and through that citizen science. Going back to the Casco project, the people that are monitoring they'll be choosing sites that are quite local to them, because another barrier to accessing the countryside is actually transport and the cost of transport, or the lack of public transport in rural areas. So they're quite local to them. But what's great is, although maybe somewhere they've lived for the last 20, 25 years, they really get to know that spot. Every week they're taking a photograph of the riverbed, they're seeing the sediment build up, they're seeing one week it's the water's murky, the following week it's clear. So they build up that knowledge and actually they become experts for that monitoring site. So that expertise that's built up over time empowers them. So the solution to that lack of access, I might have gone too far, is Norfolk Rivers Trust working with land managers and working out where we can carry out citizen science surveys that's not going to hinder their work on that land, and it's also going to enable us to gather data that will inform future projects. We've been working really closely with WWF on the project called Wholescape. There's 3 Wholescape regions, Pembrokeshire, the Firth of Forth and Norfolk. And that Wholescape project's in partnership with Norfolk County Council, Norfolk Rivers Trust, and we collaborate. It's a lot of collaboration going on. And the key strands that WWF have picked up is that the UK is incredibly nature deprived. Despite it being a highly developed country, our nature is in catastrophic decline. So they've picked up 3 strands, which is how do we enable communities to become more climate resilient? How do we ensure biodiversity is protected and enhanced at the same time as producing food for people and enabling there to be places for people to go and visit green spaces. So they call that the triple challenge. So part of our work with Wholescapes has been looking at floodplain connection, looking at how farms can think about where they want to be in 50 years' time. Are they wanting to be growing food? Do they want to be farming for nature a little bit more? And then how do we enable communities to connect with their local landscape? So the riverfly has been part of that. So the 8 groups that the riverfly monitoring scheme look at, we've got 4 mayflies, we've got stonefly, caseless caddis and case caddis, and then the freshwater shrimp. Those 8 have been chosen because they have incredibly long life cycles in the water. They have gills, so they rely on dissolved oxygen, unlike an invertebrate like the water scorpion or the diving beetle that will draw in air from above the river. And actually that they could be in the river for up to 2 years, they could molt up to 50 times, but when they metamorphosize and travel up through the water column and fly, they're only flying for 2 days roughly, where they're going to mate, they're going to lay eggs, and then the cycle continues. So the populations of those groups in those rivers really reflect what the water quality is like. Some of those mayflies like sediment, some of them like stones. The case caddis, some build their homes out of bits of vegetation, others build their homes out of fine grits. So there you go, there's an example. On the left, we've got a water scorpion, and on the right, we've got the Ephemera danica, known as the green drake, which you might just pick out the gills towards the lower abdomen. So very different. And what we're getting, it's interesting, a lot of our riverfly sites are private, but the sites we've got near, for example, a ford and Great Walsingham, we get people walking past, cycling past, they'll stop and they'll look in the trays and they'll say things like, I've walked my dog here for 20 years, I didn't know that this life was in the river. So that whole piece about being quite public with our surveys is a great opportunity to show the public what's going on in the rivers. So in terms of reach, the Riverfly partnership, as you can see, it's got a UK reach. It's interesting, when I prepared this presentation ages ago, beginning of September, in the last 12 months, there have been 9,600 surveys taken place over the UK, and of those, 70 identified a pollution incident of some sort. When I updated it before I emailed this presentation to Jordan, it had gone up to 9,900, and the trigger breaches had gone up by 12. So going back to that, empowering people who live locally, if they're doing a citizen science project and they know that their data will inform what the Environment Agency do, because what will happen if there is a trigger breach, a second survey is carried out immediately, and if it breaches the trigger level again, which is set by the Environment Agency ecologist, that's when the triage process starts. We phone the Environment Agency, their incident team comes out and they start to look at how they can mitigate whatever's the problem is. So if it's an oil spill, they'll put booms out. We've had pesticide spills in Kent that have been identified because of river fly monitors. And I share this with our volunteers to say, look, what you're doing is absolutely fantastic, it's relevant, it's valuable. Let's hope we've not had a trigger breach in Norfolk. Let's hope we never get one, but if we do, at least our monitors are out there and they're able to identify it quickly. So it has taken quite a lot of effort. Our focus has been North Norfolk. We've got 6 rivers flowing into the North Sea. We've strategically chosen sites where they're quite close to sewage treatment works because the whole point of the survey is to identify if there has been some sort of breach. So we try and get 2 sites on each river, one upstream of the sewage treatment works, if you like, that's the control, and then one downstream. So it covers 360 kilometres squared of catchment, so it's a huge area. Some of the bigger rivers, we've got more than 2 sites being monitored on a regular basis. And it links in with the EA operational catchment, so there's our North Norfolk rivers. We've also included the Hun, which is part of the Northwest Norfolk catchment. The smaller rivers, we tend to survey, we may only find one site that's suitable, and we may only survey quarterly. It just does depend. What we found this year is some of those smaller rivers have dried up in the headwaters, which has meant that surveying has been slightly compromised. Thank you. And this is what it looks like on the cartographer website. So again, it goes back to that kind of training our volunteers so that they feel like they're part of it from beginning to end. So we've run 3 riverfly monitoring workshops. We show them how to upload the data onto cartographer, which is fairly easy. And for some who maybe feel that they're not IT savvy enough, then there's a paper field recording form, and we will take a photograph and we'll upload it in the office for them. You can see all those little colourful circles are where all the riverfly sites are in North Norfolk. Some of them are run by or coordinated by Norfolk Rivers Trust, others are coordinated by the Wensum Catchment Partnership, Wild Ken Hill, but we all talk to each other and share resources. So one thing that's come out from the University of Derby work is that people from deprived communities find it harder to access green and blue spaces. So we know that we're going to have a certain demographic that's got the time and can afford to both take a day out or half a day to carry out the surveys, can afford the transport to get to the survey site. Because remember, often these are private, they're not part of the public transport network, so cars are really the only way to get there. I've got one volunteer who cycles, which is fantastic. I take the net because she can't carry the net on her bike. So this table really is just to demonstrate the scope in terms of the rivers that we're surveying on, but the demographic of who we've got working and volunteering for us. So the majority are volunteers who may be close to retirement, can afford transport and afford taking time out of their week to volunteer. But we've also approached youth groups. So we've got a youth group where they work with children who are school refusers. So they come out with us, so they've got their own site they've adopted. They have a minibus, so that solves the transport problem. They're a charity, so they seek funding for that. We've helped them find funding as well. So that's really important. We'll have 6 young people, all the way up to 12 young people, aged from 13 up to even into the young 20s. So that's really important. They're people that have not engaged and thought, oh, I want to get into the environmental sector. They are children who are struggling to cross the threshold at our high school. So to give them the opportunity to do something outdoors, to feel like they're doing something relevant and powerful that actually sneakily also covers a bit of maths and science is absolutely fantastic. And it's, you know, seeing those children grow and become more confident is a really good thing to see. Oh, gone too far. So the last thing really is just to emphasize the fact that we cannot, you know, it would be lovely if there was funding to say, let's open up the Norfolk countryside, let's have more permissive access. It can happen, and it will happen to a certain degree, and we've got great exemplars at Courtyard Farm in Ringstead. We've got Chris Skinner south of Norwich, where they've got permissive access. But actually for us to show the public our work, we need to work with land managers build up trust and say, we're going to come onto, if it's okay with you, we're going to come onto your land, we're going to do a survey of the river that we've just cut, and we're going to show that group. So a lovely example is near in the Stiffkey catchment, we have a riverfly monitoring site which we go to monthly. It's a site where 2 years ago a river didn't exist. So we're now seeing how the ecological communities are growing. We're bringing volunteers onto that site, and we've now also, in the last 6 weeks, the local school have come and had a look. And we've done some riverfly monitoring. We've looked at the ditch as it once was and where the new river is. So, and that was a class of 25 children. So, but we, as I said, we can't do that without the support of land managers. And there's plenty more work to do and plenty more opportunities. Thank you.